So the next conversation is with the very versatile Dr. Mohan Agashe. The conversation is on mental health through the lens of Indian cinema. To lead this conversation, may I invite Ms. Subhra Priyadarshini, who is an award-winning science journalist and currently the editor of Nature India. She's been a correspondent with major Indian dailies like the Times of India, the Indian Express, the Asian Age, the Telegraph, and the news agency Press Trust of India. And she's been an inspiration to many interested in careers in science communication. Over to you, Subhra.
Thank you, Madan. Please welcome Dr. Mohan Agashe. Dr. Agashe, thespian, Padma Shri. Dr. Agashe is a film actor, trained psychiatrist, and now a roving educator, if you will, on many issues, including mental health. He's been instrumental in setting up the Maharashtra Institute of Mental Health in Pune. He has an enviable list of students across the world with flourishing careers as psychiatrists. He's been an advisor to the Maharashtra government on mental health, education, and service. And of course, we all know about his glorious stint as the Director General of the Film and Television Institute of India in Pune in not-so-newsier times, 1997. Was it as newsy as it is today? FTII? It was still in news when you were around?
Yeah, it was.
It was, okay.
It's always in news.
Yeah, always in news. Okay. So let me begin by thanking you for having this conversation with me, first of all. And like we sort of had a pre-conversation before this, and we were talking about the connect between our trades and professions and how one thing has led to the other for both of us, and how we have chosen careers that were finally our calling. We didn't begin with careers that we laid out for ourselves by way of training. So yeah, so that's one thing I'd pick you on as we start conversing more. And the food for thought by way of his recent works, one of them is the great theatre production, which is called the Zara Samjhun Gya. Did I pronounce that right? It's a Marathi play, which is about the quintessential dilemmas of doctors practicing modern medicine in a challenging medico-legal environment in India that is right now. So, and of course the other national award-winning Kasav about depression, and Astu that deals with aging and dementia. Of course, we've seen him in so many films and have appreciated her work in more than 75 films. Is that right?
I didn't count.
You didn't count. Okay, that's what your profile says. So I think
anyway, we decided to introduce in different way. There's been a lot of talk going on and a lot of PPTs and everything. So my introduction is going to be audio-visual.
Yes.
Right.
So let's
just
have
what brings us together is both of us are sort of outcast, from our respective professions. I'm not into popular cinema, and the films I've supported find it difficult to distribute and get the viewers. So I really have to go not from house to house, but from group to group to show the film and talk about it. And she also sort of paved a way through popular journalism to nature, after having worked in print media. And I'm, of course, scared of her because I can't write well. I'm sort of dyslexic, which I could not announce till recently, because in our times, dyslexia was not respected. Now it is honor to be dyslexic. So now it is some status symbol. So one of the reasons I sat in the library is not to read, but closely observe and understand who understands by reading. And then later not make friends with him, but initiate dialogue, provoke him, so that he vomits whatever he has read. That was my method of studying, actually, right. And so I will go, since I brought a clip. Yeah.
Please welcome the well-known actor, thinker, psychiatrist.
We get all kinds of people, but basically severely disturbed patients like schizophrenia, manic depressive psychosis.
And Padma Shri, Mohan Agashe.
Namaskar.
That's it.
That last one was crazy. What was that? You were dancing.
Oh, that was I did one mainstream cinema called Trimurti. And I'm very happy that that was the first major flop of Subhash Ghai. So that was my way of proving how villains are stronger than heroes. There were three heroes, Shah Rukh Khan, Jake Ishroff, and Anil Kapoor, but the villain was very strong. So the film flopped.
All right. So I think we'll begin by opening the conversation about Indian cinema and the portrayal of, among other things, mental health issues in cinema. What do you think about how we portray? Do we scrape the surface? Do we go in? What exactly is happening in Indian cinema?
So
apart from the Shah Rukh Khan starrer that we saw about, he was playing a psychiatrist. What was the name of the movie? I forget. What was that? Is Zindagi, Dear Zindagi. Have you seen that movie?
Yeah, okay. I've seen that, yeah. Okay. See, one of the major problems that worried me, I am close to projecting mental health in cinemas, is of late, especially after the revolution of digital media, I realized one thing, and which is very important for us to notice. See, the print media, your media, preceded digital media by 300 years. Right? And so, it percolated deep into education system. And so, reading and writing became mandatory for all of us, whatever we do in life, whether you are researcher, non-researcher, practitioner, whatever it is. And we study it for 15 years at least, from before going to school till the end of college. We read and write. So entire focus of formal education has been the left hemisphere of brain. Thinking, logic, reasoning, and everything. So it has taught us to think and analyze. But unfortunately, it hasn't taught us to observe, understand, and accept, which is very important in mental health. And with digital media now, everybody is using image and sound without learning anything about it. As you know, this small instrument, there is more abuse and overuse than use. These days, we don't even see with our own eyes anything. If you see and everybody comes and says, may I take a photo or selfie, which is bad. So I thought it was very important to project mental health through image and sound because it really connects much better than a lecture. It's a very strong medium, and the filmmaker I worked with was a social scientist. And she turned to filmmaking because she was doing research on women, urban slum, and their identity problems, graduate of Tata Institute. And at the end of it, she ran into problem because none of these women could read or write. But all of these women saw films. And so she thought, why not make a film? Because that is more influential. And her experience of first film and the animated debate it generated made her become a filmmaker and learn this new language of image and sound. And to prove my point, I'm going to show you only 1 minute film. Why? Because the point it makes in less than 1 minute, this film is from the Ability Foundation's competition of 60 seconds to fame, and the subject was inclusive society. So you had to make a statement within 60 seconds to communicate your message effectively. So I'm going to show you that film, 1663, to make my point, because my time is very short. I would have loved to show you a film, such a beautiful auditorium. Regular Habitat Film Festival happens here, and you can see quality films, but we can see 1 minute film. Can we have these lights so that...
ஏப்பா அவனை பார்த்தா உனக்கு பாவமா இல்லை? எல்லாம் நமக்கு தான் தெரியும். ஏப்பா ஒரு நாளைக்கு 200 ரூபா சம்பாதிப்பியா? அதில் 1 ரூபா போட்டு நான் குறைஞ்சா போயிடுவேன். ஐயோ சேஞ்ச் இல்லையே சார். அதை அந்த கடையில் வாங்கிட்டு வா.
I think a lecture on disability doesn't convey as effectively as this film does about attitudes. And films are very important for attitudes. One thing for effective learning, you need 2 things, interest and ability. Interest and intellect. So their interest is like an ovum, and intellectual programming are like sperms. And learning is the child of interest and intellect. The function of good literature, good film, good theater is to bring the ovum of interest into ovulation phase, so that the child of learning is born. And once it is born, you don't have to do anything because it grows on its own. And this proof also I have why I use films. The idea of making film is to motivate, generate interest. Interest is in the domain of emotion, which is in the domain of subconscious and unconscious. And intellect is in the domain of cognitive brain. So to meet them together, if you may be very intelligent, but if you are not interested, no learning is going to take place. But if you are tremendously interested, even if you are intellectually challenged, you are still going to learn something. And so that is the reason why I resorted to film, besides my own personal reasons of being intellectually challenged. But then I found that is the way of effective learning. And in both these films which I did with Sumitra Bhave, it highlights the point that how empathy is essential in management of a case and not only intellect. Because scientists really contribute a lot. But if it doesn't come together, if IQ and EQ don't function together, there could be problems. In the end, I will show you one clip of scientific advances, technological advances. But before that, I must ask you, how did you give up your media and what is happening in your media? What is happening in medicine, I'm really worried. That's the reason I'm doing this play, written also by a doctor, because the doctor-patient relationship, which once was based on care, compassion, and trust, gradually has become prosecutor-defendant through buyer-seller. So what has caused this? And how the profession has been hijacked by corporates, insurance companies, government, pharmas, and not only medical profession. I'm worried because this has happened in field of education and also entertainment. None of these professions today are dominated by professionals. They're dominated by business people. They dictate how the profession should work. That is my major concern in doing this play, and I think it's very serious the way it happens, particularly in India today, because in India, unlike West, there is actually physical violence. The destruction of the hospital material, beating of doctors, and the understanding between the two, humanity in medicine, is as important. All technological innovations cannot substitute humanity in medicine. Otherwise, that's so something like that must have brought you because your media. Right. Because once upon a time, we had very clear conditioning that news is real and film is fiction. Now it's exactly opposite. News is far more fictional and entertaining
we had a pact
than art
before
cinema.
this, right? We had a pact before coming to the stage. We won't say bad things about each other. But yeah, I totally agree to what you're saying. And things like, what drove you from psychiatry into coming to theater and acting is very similar to what drove me from mainstream journalism into science journalism, because commerce obviously governs a lot of things in the media landscape today. Not just commerce, there's political interests, there's commercial interests, there's what have you. You have so many other things that govern how a news would end up being in a newspaper or broadcast house. So for me, the choice for giving up political and film and sports journalism was primarily driven by the fact that science journalism was way more impactful. The connect with society is greater, I thought, and I'm in the last 2 decades of doing science journalism, I've found that not very far from the truth, because every other day you have a story that can make an impact, and it's almost always a positive story. It's almost always a positive narrative, something that you're unraveling, something interesting that you're bringing out from the labs to the masses. And so for me, I think it's very much the same reasons for creating that space for something that is untold or uncharted in popular imagination and popular narrative. I think the stories...
See, sensitivity and sensationalism is the major problem. See, unfortunately, formal education does not, these days, provoke sensitivity, promotes intelligence. And the media, general media, provokes sensationalism. The idea of making this film is to give authentic information, but through a story. The major problem of mainstream cinema is, as I told you, print media came 300, film came 100 years ago, and it came primarily for entertainment. So many of us, in fact, very intelligent and educated people, many times tell me, oh, when I go to film, I leave my brain home. मैं दिमाग घर पे छोड़ के जाता हूँ फिल्म देखने को. So the attitude is we go to films as an emotional laxative, which it is not, if at all. Because through any film, like any event in life, you are given passive information through film. And the effect of passive information can be far more negative than passive smoking, because they give rise to stigma. And one of our main issues is how to fight stigma. And the genesis of stigma is because in order to make film entertaining, they compromise the authenticity of information. And so the way mental health or professionals are depicted in any film, not only doctors or psychiatrists, even the police, the politicians generally, the way they are projected are more of caricatures than real people. True. And that is compromised. It's almost like your mother offering you yesterday's food. And because you should eat it without complaint, putting a lot of masala into it and make it a nice, tasty food. So mainstream cinema is almost like a junk food. And if you eat junk food, well, you are left with no choice, but eventually go to a doctor and go on a diet. So these days I've changed my profession. From a doctor, I become a nutritionist. I prescribe cinematic diet to improve your mental health. Right? And like you go to any, this has to be done. Or depending on the program, I'm in a scientific community. So I say the intellectual software works on motivational platform. And I'm for health sector, I do surgery of education under anesthesia of entertainment. So you can choose whatever way you like it. Scientists of late, medical scientists, those who want to extend the lifespan. I'll give you a small story and my time will end probably. So I'm not going to talk much unless you want me to talk by your questions. About health situation, what is happening in the research and what is happening in health. When I landed at USA some 10 years ago at Liberty International Airport, as I was coming out, I saw a big hoarding. And he said, when this airport was built, the lifespan was 62 years. Today it is 87 years. Please insure yourself. I went home to my brother's house. I saw 3 big hoardings. Every third child born today will live 100 years. Please insure yourself. Insure more. I reached Washington and the front page news, very soon the human lifespan will be 150 years. Why? 7 ways to defy death. So, my question to medical community, with what lifespan are we going to be happy? 150, 200, 250, 300. There's an old story of Amrut Manthan. Lifespan is elongated, but unfortunately only at one end. That's my major concern. Quality of life. My intention in doing this is to make you think about stigma, which has been put on two words, death and old. Nobody likes to be called old. And no doctor allows you to die peacefully. This is a fact when you go to all this here. And so I think I'm trying desperately to change the orientation to give respect and come back to cultural values, ancient, which have come after hard life, that conscious acceptance of old age is unconscious acceptance of death as a natural consequence of life. After all, life is sexually transmitted fatal illness. So be prepared for it.
I don't want to take away from that wonderful thought, but I think I'll steer the conversation a little bit towards public engagement of research and science, what both of us are talking about, and why it is important.
That is far more important. I'll tell you why. Because I'm also a bit worried about research communities are getting so specialized that the way they do research and talk is best understood only by research community. Then they present their papers in a language which ordinary people don't understand. Then they present it in conferences, publish in journals, which go into cupboards, and only when one wants it for reference, one refers. So the communication between what is important for community, the research is primarily done for improve the quality of life of the community, in every field actually. So if there is no effective communication between the research community and community at large, and there is no other medium like audiovisual medium which you can use desperately, and that is why I think it's mandatory also to learn this language of image and sound, how it functions, so that we can effectively communicate, particularly in our country where there's still huge population which can't read and write effectively. And so we can use this medium more positively between the research community and community. And one of the main objectives of doing these films is because I show these films and initiate public dialogue about health and the concept. So I think there is no other better medium to make, but while film, what is good about film, what should be a good film is, as long as you see it, you don't get time to think. But the moment it finishes, you can't help yourself but think about it. So my idea of a good film is where the screening finishes, thought begins and you can't leave it. You want to discuss it. And the bad film is 15 minutes, half an hour, the film begins, you start thinking of what you have to do after the film. With those simple things, I think we should look at this medium far more effectively as a wonderful adjuvant to research, to public engagement, to self-growth, and effective communication between two people.
Right. So, and we also know that researchers almost always rely on publications in peer-reviewed journals for communicating their science or research. But there are, as you know, it's much harder to publish unverified results. But we have heard from the earlier panel about how researchers are using even preprints to get that across. There's a way to publish unsuccessful trials or evaluations now. And so I think public engagement doesn't just end with popular medium like films or a news report, but also in databases that are publicly available. And one of the databases that is celebrated across the world in mental health is the Mental Health Innovation Network, especially for researchers who are developing solutions to local problems, and those can be adapted elsewhere as well. So I think that's a takeaway. How do you see the community, the actors community, grappling with issues of mental health? Do you have a whole lot of issues there? I'm sure you want to mention some of them.
It's a very paradoxical situation. You see, on one hand, acting and theater can be therapy to many others, but to the own community, there is a high percentage of psychological morbidity in actors and creative people. Yeah. And one of the reasons for that is because they become creative because they are abnormal. The perception of things, and scientists also. Because unless you think and perceive things differently, that's another reason why I took psychiatry, because normal people don't interest me at all. They are not interesting at all. I get along better with those who are little not normal. So the idea is not to necessarily treat them, but is to protect them from so-called normal people. Actually, one of the major problems in psychiatry, people think he's a doctor of mad. Actually, we are not. The mad persons don't need doctor. They have already found a solution. Is there relatives and other people who bring these people, and they wait so long that the other person has to be brought tied by 5, 6 people, and they bring him to you and say, please, treat him. And say, what happened? And as you take the history, you know that they have been so tolerant, they have noticed something is wrong, but they wouldn't bring him. And then you ask them, why did you bring him today? They say, oh, now we can't manage him. So I said, okay then, treat him so that we feel better. I said, if you want to feel better, I will treat you. Why should I treat him? This is an important part of communication to go on that people. We are on the same scale. Thresholds are different, some people. And high respect for scientists and artists, because I am closer to them and my job is to protect you people. I'm trying to do it as far as possible. And informal education, if we don't now pay attention to EQ, which is being talked about a lot now, but still there are no active steps taken out, especially in IT sector and scientific sector. Students with very high IQ in medical school are facing a lot of problems of mental health. Because the major problem in mental health are minor problems, like anxieties, depression, transient situational problems, matters of relationships and everything. What is portrayed in the popular film is not even 1% of the mental health problem. And the idea is to take it across the public to film media is that. And that is why this film about depression. Because many times you don't even know that people, you don't know, even other people don't know that you are depressed and you are anxious. Because there is no awareness about how to identify it, how to know it within yourself. Astu, when I was shown, it was invited to many festivals. It was invited to major universities in India as well as abroad, from Niemans to Harvard University. What was surprising is even educated people came and talked to Sumitra and me, saying, we wish we had seen this film earlier we would have behaved differently with our elders. This is the status of average health education in the country. So I don't think there is a better tool than this tool if we know exactly how to use it. It's a double-edged weapon. So it's like a knife, which in itself is not bad. You can stab a person, or you can cut an apple, or you can do a surgery. The idea is the attitude behind, mind behind, and if that we can affect, and this is the only medium to affect that because it's through senses, not sensibility.
I think it's true for most professions today, journalism being one of them, where most people would argue that it's a debilitating profession if the mental health issues are concerned. We have really cranky newsrooms, and people suffer from a lot of issues in those newsrooms. It's just very recently we've started acknowledging the fact that post-traumatic stress disorder is actually a thing in the profession, and the fact that it needs to be addressed. And certainly in India, I don't see most editorial policy aligned towards how we can address this issue among journalists who face such traumatic experiences throughout their professional lives. They go out and cover wars. They go out and cover a lot of things that could be affecting their mental health on a daily basis. And so I think there is need, of course, for guidelines. And we have all heard about the case of women in journalism recently with the Me Too thing, where there's an additional burden on women journalists who have to face that kind of harassment as well. So work-related harassment in the profession, from where I come from, is and mental health issues are immense. I think we'll, in the interest of time, we'll just quickly see the film. And how many? It's 5 minutes? Okay. We can see a couple of minutes, and we'll open the floor for questions after that.
I'm going to show you a 4-minute film. 5 minutes. Because I can't show my feature film. The feature film is 2 hours. No, it's another interesting thing, why you make feature films and why you make short films also. It's because you can teach the same subject in primary school, middle school, high school, and you can take it for PhD also. So each time language of communication changes depending on your growth. Right? So I've chosen a 4-minute film, and it can be used in different circumstances. I can tell you which circumstances. Let's see the film first. And film should be seen like a film. It's not Indian, but good film.
Τι είναι αυτό?
Ένα σφραγίδι.
Τι είναι αυτό? Μόλις τώρα στο πατέρα, σπουργίτη είναι.
Τι είναι αυτό?
Ένα σπουργίτη είναι, πατέρα. Ένα σπουργίτη. Σπου-γι-τι!
Τι είναι αυτό?
Γιατί το κάνεις αυτό το πράγμα, μπορείς να μου πεις? Τόσες φορές σου είπα, είναι ένα σπουργίτη! Δεν το καταλαβαίνεις! Πού πας?
Δυνατά.
Σήμερα ο μικρός μου γιος που πριν λίγες μέρες έκλεισε τα 3 καθόταν μαζί μου έξω στο πάρκο όταν ένας σπουργίτη ήρθε και κάθισε απέναντί μας. Ο γιος μου με ρώτησε 21 φορές τι ήταν αυτό και του απάντησα και τις 21 φορές ότι ήταν ένα σπουργίτη. Τον αγκάλιασα τρυφερά και τις 21 φορές που μου έκανε την ίδια ερώτηση, ξανά και ξανά, χωρίς να εκνευριστώ, νιώθοντας στοργή για το αθώο μου αγοράκι.
Use it even for normal relations or for dementia, with caregivers and everything. But the good thing about audiovisual, and many times you don't notice it, if you notice this film, when film begins, it begins with stones, an iron door, and everything rough in life, and it ends all green with reason. So how images are used also. So many times in films actually you should take out a clip and see how they affect you. All the educated people also worried about ad films because in half a minute they can influence children and women to purchase things which they don't need. That's the effectiveness of this medium. So I'm glad I'm happy to show.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great lesson in film appreciation, and we'll certainly dissect our films henceforth, minute by minute, in parts that influenced us. Open for questions? Yes.
Okay. So actually, my question is more towards the message in the last film. I've been a caregiver for an Alzheimer's. My grandfather had Alzheimer's. And I mean, although I was quite young. So, I mean, it affects the caregiver person as well. And I've seen my grandmother go through it. How do you, do you look at the mental health of the caregiver as well? Because it's very difficult for the caregiver to see somebody and be able to orient. I know that you feel that it is, I mean, not every relative understands, that's true. But I mean, when your loved one suffers, or you think they're suffering, maybe they're not actually. So the caregiver who sees reality in a different way suffers quite a bit. I mean, I guess, how do you help, or how do you assess that? Or what can be there for them?
Just to add to that, I think we had a great commercially successful film in Piku, where this aspect of caregiving was also highlighted very well. So, yeah.
Astu also, you can go on Amazon Prime. I don't know if you've seen it. But if you could get to, that's something which I couldn't show.
Yeah, I just looked it up.
That exactly deals from multifaceted angle, the caregiver problem and the patient problem, and what is acceptance and what is question. The point which I was trying to make, that how, because they are just juxtaposed two women, one so-called uneducated. And he comes, when he arrives, that demented person there, from the talk, she doesn't like it at all, because she has so many mouths to feed and one more mouth. So she says, why did you bring him here? Better give it to the police. Right? But from his way, she thinks, oh my God, he's an educated man, and probably he may be God. But the next moment she realizes he may be God, but he's behaving as a child. But it poses no problem for her to give him the respect to be like you give to your parents, but treat him like a child in the same time. This problem comes to a person who thinks a lot, not sensitive enough, right? So, because you do the same thing for children, you don't get mad. With the old people, you get mad. But there, it is instead of telling, through various situations, you come to know what is the situation of a caregiver and what best can be done.
Do you think a lot?
Anyway, for those interested, you can go on Amazon Prime and look for So Be It.
Astu is the name of the film. Archita.
My question is about EQ and IQ that you mentioned earlier. Now, as you mentioned, like 300 years of print media helped develop IQ quite a lot. In contrast, today we have abundance of audiovisual content. In fact, so how do you control, and once you have an abundance of audiovisual content, people tend to get addicted to it and ignore the IQ part. So how do you control the quality and quantity of audiovisual content so that the IQ part is not ignored?
The whole idea of control is bad, first of all. Yeah. I think it's a Charlie Chaplin who said, you need power only when you want to do something bad. Otherwise, most of the things can be done with love. Here, the education is the only way. I'll tell you why. And your problem is very genuine, which all of us see, because today, what has happened is, because of the possibility to expand virtual space and virtual time, there is a complete discordant. You are together in the same space and time, but you are not in the same space and time, unlike earlier times. So this is a problem. But if you try to control it, it will bounce back. The other way is flooding. Let them do it more and more till they realize themselves. And also because if you don't know what is used, again, as I said, we are not using, very soon there will be early dementia cases because we are not relying on our own memory. We have outsourced our memory to our mobile, which is a fact. You go anywhere, anything. Any place you go, people are moving with camera and taking photographs all the time. So you are not using your memory at all, using this. But this has to be told depending on the age again and the facility. Right at the beginning, till it is novel, you can't do anything. But once the novelty is over, then there are very things to do.
I think one more thing that you
Or
could probably...
if scientists say, we may be evolving into a new species, which is quite possible. Because we are human beings, we are becoming ancient and outdated. Probably we are evolving into new species where we don't need all the things which your earlier things.
New species with selfie-titis. Yeah. And no, I think to her question, you were referring earlier to nutrition, which is by which I think you meant quality over quantity.
I refer to my film as nutritious films than the junk. I'm into nutritious films, so you can tell there are good things also with that. There are many good things. Like yesterday's presentation was how you can monitor medication or treatment monitoring. So using it for a proper cause is good. See, even in schools and there, they teach you to read and write. But what to read and write is your choice. No? And that brings us into a very different area, which we can't discuss now, has to do with value education. And that is very important because what has changed, earlier we didn't go to school till 6 years. That's the early part of, it's called formative years. Formative years, we played games. All those games promote sensory development. Today, we spend 25,000 rupees and put our name into sensory awareness workshop after growing up, which was earlier free without going to school. Because in any way, in human beings, intelligence is the last thing to develop. Verbal, cognitive intelligence. The sensitivity develops first, actually. So, if you just indirectly guide them, not ordering them, show them some interesting things which can be done with mobiles or audiovisual. A lot of good young people are doing mobile films, 1 minute, 2 minute film. So if you tell them, encourage them to give them an exercise to make a film, probably that's a good way of channelizing the vision.
I think with that brilliant life lesson, we'll wrap this session up. And I'll let Dr. Agashe loose into the audience for more questions and answers. Madan is looking at me from the corner of his eyes. Thank you, Dr. Agashe. Let's give him an ovation. Thank you.